Alright, so what I'm doing is, I don't know when, by the time you guys hear these email shares, I would have been gone for days already. I'm on the remote coast of Vancouver Island. So, but I'll be back shortly and with a whole pile of cool stuff to share, no doubt. I'm currently working on some unbelievable outdoor adventure content. I'm actually contemplating making 2 movies. Solely dedicated to outdoors, adventure, fishing, possibly hunting, I'm not sure yet, maybe even this topic, I don't know. But I do know one thing that I'm creating, and I'm trying to film some underwater clips that nobody's ever done before. And so far I've been fairly fortunate, but just so you know, that's what I'm doing currently. While you hear this, I am away doing that. And I hope I'm successful in my goals. Anyway, but in the meantime, there is so many shares to be shared, it's a little ridiculous. And as usual, I usually want to hit the record button. I've already got a whole slew of things I want to drop on everybody, all you very intelligent people, for you to think about and add into and comment about. And right now my mind's gone blank, probably because I got far too many things on the go, too many things to do. I have had a handful of people email back my request. Last week I requested that if we could just find our true great human beings of the world today and find who they are, where they are, so I could promote them and we can learn from them. And I do have an email I'm going to share eventually. Anyway, I think that'd be really great. So hopefully if you people, all people, could please try to find our great true human beings of this lifetime in this world today that we should be listening to and promoting and seeking their knowledge to share amongst each other. I think that'd be very, very helpful in our quest for a real fulfilled lifetime for each of us. But anyway, babbling along, let me get on with it. This email is, I'm inside right now, okay? I'm inside recording the audio. There's been buckets and buckets of water's been falling from the sky, and I'm too stacked up to be able to go bomb around for a couple hours, climb the mountain for a couple hours, set up stuff, and let it rip. And so in the meantime, behind the audio, the video I'm going to put up, I don't know what I'll put up yet. Probably some nature, definitely outdoor shots. And just as a side note, yes, every single video clip I share with all you, whether it be in the mountains or in the ocean or in the wildlife, it's all, I've filmed it all. It's all mine, if you're curious about that. Okay? And I've got so many clips. I've been videoing and forcing myself. I'm very passionate about filming adventure and outdoors in the real world. So I have literally, I think I have a stack of external hard drives full of content from my outdoor adventures that I try to share tidbits with you guys in the openers and the endings of the videos. And I guess if I start doing a few of these with just the audio, then I can really throw down a bunch of real cool shit for you guys to watch while I share. So that's what I'm going to do with this video. I haven't decided yet. I guess I will when it comes time to edit. That it's either going to be wildlife or just mountain and ocean. Unbelievable scenes. So I hope you enjoy. Now here we go. This email is titled The Sound. Hello, Steve. I discovered you a couple years ago watching your hunting videos. The stories are all so fascinating and your backgrounds are drop dead. It's quite refreshing to see someone with a no-nonsense approach who knows what the hell he's talking about and does it with a down-to-earth attitude. Now, thanks for those kind words. I first started hunting when I was 7 years old. I quickly developed a love for the great outdoors with its cool mountains, colorful trees, open valleys, lakes, streams, wildlife, and seasons. The incident I experienced took place over 40 years ago. It was the summer of 1979, and at that time, I lived in Lake Tahoe area. Every summer, a trip was required to cut down some trees and then split them up, all in preparation for the winter. Myself and 3 of my buddies, Dave, Chris, and Brandon, made plans for our annual trip. We were all in the construction trade and had trees, firewood, for years. This year, we had an added bonus. We purchased a new chainsaw with a 42-inch bar. Prior to our trip, I went to the forestry station in order to obtain the required permit. They told me that they opened a new area. This new area was about 40 miles further than where we usually went. However, they assured me that there was a lot of good timber up there. The following Saturday, we packed up and headed out. The 4 of us took separate vehicles so that we could haul back as much wood as possible. When we got to our destination, we took off on a dirt road, which zigzagged its way through the heavily wooded area. We eventually found a huge dead tree that was still standing. It was enormous. It at least 10 cords of wood. Yeah, that's a good chunk of wood. It was perfect test for a new saw. It took some time, but we downed the giant fir and started the delimbing process. While cutting into the rounds, a green Jeep suddenly appeared and approached us. When it reached us, two guys stepped out. They looked like game wardens, but turned out to be forestry rangers. I showed them our permit, and we all chatted for about 10 minutes. As they headed back to the vehicle, one of them, Jim, turned and said, "Make sure you get out of here by sunset." We waited for them to leave and then looked at each other and said, "What did he say? Get out by sunset?" We all thought that was an unusual statement, but eventually just shrugged it off and continued working. The terrain was steep and angled down from the flat road in which we were located. The slope continued down and then, for about 40 yards away, grew into a wide and almost level section of land. Chris came up with a brilliant idea. Rather than push the large heavy rounds uphill to the road, all we had to do was simply roll them downhill to that flat area. We finished cutting a good portion of the tree, then we moved our trucks from the road down to that lower area. It was late afternoon and we began splitting up the rounds, but we weren't close to finishing. We didn't plan to spend the night, but it was inevitable. We'd have time to finish in the morning. It was nice to relax. We sat around a small fire, cracked open a couple beers, and talked about miscellaneous stuff. Included was the comment that Jim, the Forest Service guy, made earlier in the day. Several hours had passed, and, except for the light of the fire, the only thing we could see were the stars. Darkness settled in. Then out of nowhere and off in the distance, something made a sound that we had never heard before. It was an eerie, screeching sound. It was long and it was loud. We looked at each other and in unison said, "What the F was that?" We listened for several minutes, but the sound was never repeated. We eventually resumed a conversation, which now included that extremely unusual sound. During our discussion, we noticed that Brandon was now dead asleep. Approximately 30 minutes later, all hell broke loose. There was a tremendous crashing sound. Something large, very large, seemed to be running through the woods and was headed towards us. There was a cracking sound of branches and limbs being destroyed. Nobody had a clue what could make such a sound. The only thing that could be determined was whatever was making this enormous sound was as massive as a Sherman tank and had the speed of a gazelle. It then let out this incredibly loud screeching noise. This was then followed by the sound of a tree being slammed against another tree. This entire event only lasted a mere 15 to 20 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime, and it scared the hell out of us. We found ourselves standing motionless, frozen with fear. There we were, three guys with, what I like to call, the Roy Scheider look, from Jaws, when Sheriff Brody sees the shark for the first time. What followed next was complete and total silence. Time seemed to stand still. The only thing audible was the occasional crackling from the fire, and Brandon's deep breathing as he remained asleep. What was this thing? Was it in attack mode? If so, how do we defend ourselves? We didn't even bring any guns. So many thoughts are flying through my head at light speed. Although we couldn't see a thing, we all had a spine-tingling feeling that we were being watched. It was terrifying. After what felt like a lifetime, it occurred to me. We weren't without means. I softly blurted out, "Chainsaws." We scurried like rats to get our saws and started them up. For at least a full minute, they were revved up at full throttle. We were anticipating that something would come flying out of the pitch-black forest. Without realizing it, the noise of the chainsaws woke up Brandon, who began yelling, "What the hell's going on? What are you guys doing?" But because the chainsaws were so loud, we were unable to hear him. This thing never attacked, nor did we ever hear it retreat. We quickly got in our trucks, drove out of the forest, and spent the night off the main highway. We went back the next morning to finish loading the wood. While standing at the same spot as the previous night, we looked uphill to where we believed the incident took place, and what we saw was frightening. There was a portion of a damaged birch tree laying diagonally across the uphill road. This was the very same road that we were on the day before. This birch tree was shattered, and the upper portion of it extending past the side of the road, which was leaning against a stump. The stump was the base of the big fir that we had cut down. This was the first visible sign that something very unusual took place. It also helped verify our case to Brandon, who thought we were drunk. We loaded up our trucks while always looking over our shoulders and left. Although we never saw any creature, and maybe that's a good thing, it was the sound. The giant, massive sound. In one of your videos on the subject, a man is trying to describe the sound he heard when some large being took a tree and smashed it against another tree. I know that sound. I recounted the story to friends and family. Unfortunately, I encountered nothing but doubt and skepticism. Dave, Chris, and Brandon all received similar reactions. Frustrated, I went to the forestry station to speak to Jim, the field agent, regarding his leave before sunset comment. A guy behind the counter said, "Oh, you mean Crazy Horse?" I asked what he meant, and he tried to get more information, but was stonewalled. I then spoke to the supervisor and asked about Jim and the term Crazy Horse. He stated that all he could say was that Jim was half Indian and that he moved back to Colorado. I consider myself very pragmatic and accept that we share this world with things we do not fully understand. I have struggled, however, to come up with the logical explanation as to why this event ever took place. What did we do to piss off this being? Was it being territorial? I'll probably never know. I was sorry to hear about the passing of Mr. Macaroni. I know he meant a lot to you. Isn't it remarkable how animals can affect us so? My condolences. Hey man, thanks for those kind words. I appreciate it. I apologize if this is too lengthy, but it's been more than 40 years, and this story has remained mute. I can now take comfort in telling my story to you, Steve, and appreciate all the work you do to help us all. Best of luck to you in the future, and remain safe. Ron. Please don't use my last name. You got it, Ron. And thank you so much for that share, man. And you know by now, I've said it I basically say this almost every email. You're not alone. You are definitely not alone. And all those people who possibly ridiculed with you when you shared with them your experience you didn't ask to, maybe possibly send this email or email message, whatever. Just pass this video on to them of me sharing a story, and then if they have any, if they're curious, they can continue listening to this video or look at other ones and listen to exactly how many honest people out there have had these experiences and never once asked for these experiences, right? But meanwhile, the majority of mainstream human population laughs and scoffs at what they don't know or understand, and it's very unfortunate, and that's why we're here. Anyway, let's keep this ball rolling. Got the computer exporting a video as I sit and record these shares. Hi Steve, I'm a native Idahoan. Born and raised and stayed. I was raised going to the mountains or lake every weekend. Fishing is a lifelong passion for me. My mom jokes that almost every picture she has of her daughter is with a fish. I was out fishing one summer day in 2011 with a male friend of mine. I pulled my Jeep back in the side road between a meadow and the creek. I parked in the grassy area approximately 30 feet from level with the creek. This particular area was heavily strip mined back in the day, so rock tailing piles along the creek and through the valley that it runs are prevalent. So rock tailing piles along the creek and through the valley that it runs are prevalent. The area where I stopped had the rock piles stacked up all along the opposite creek bank, making an approximately 10-foot higher bank on that side. There was a small sandy spot in front of the Jeep, about 20 foot square from the spring high water. My friend grabbed his gear and took off about 200 yards downstream. I grabbed my pole and fanny pack and stepped up to the sandbar. I always check the sand and general area for tracks. I saw a couple of small deer prints, nothing more. As I crossed the sandy area and stepped into the water, I heard at least 2 male voices across the creek. Seeing nothing and knowing that there is no access roads on that side, I assumed that I was hearing residual energy from the past miners. I thought, wow, energy is high today. Naive. I spotted a couple of deeper holes carved into the bank on the other side, started to make my way across to give them a try. As I was making my way across to the deeper pools, I heard in my head telepathically, "This is a sacred place." I said back in my head, "I'm only fishing. I won't hurt anything." Bracket, first mistake. End bracket. I had not begun looking into cryptid world at that time. I thought this was all past energies, possibly a different native tribe not liking my Cherokee bloodline ties. I fished for a few minutes and quickly got snagged a couple of times and no bites. I was feeling like I wasn't welcome the entire time. I turned back toward my Jeep and started making my way across the creek again. While working my way through the knee-high swift current, I felt like someone wanted to push me from behind. I put both my hands in the air and I said, "Don't you dare, I'm leaving." I put my gear into my Jeep, but still had to wait for my friend to come back, so I couldn't immediately leave. Second mistake. I was standing with my Jeep approximately 5 feet behind me, and the sandy area at my feet. My feet were about a foot apart. I was bent at the waist and looking through the sand and the rocks for pretty stones. I heard the loud rustling sound. This sounded like those gourds that you shake like the mariachi bands use, being shaken way hard and sudden. I jerked my head over my right shoulder only to see nothing but grass, not shaking, behind me. While still scanning for a source of the noise, I felt and heard what sounded like a large rock thud into the ground. So I went from turned at the waist, looking over my shoulder, to sudden thud. Jerked my head back around and there was an elk print the size of a domestic cow sunk 2 inches directly between my feet. Okay, this is odd. There's a chestnut brown blur of something about a foot high that moved straight away from me so quickly that all I saw was a blur. At that point, I raised my hands again and shouted, okay, I'm leaving. Friends showed up shortly after that. We left. I've gone back to investigate the area as it has all been marked private property in the years since, and the small access road is no longer an option. Note, the voices sounded like full-grown men. I couldn't discern what was being said. I've not heard anyone with the appearance like mine in all the cryptid stories I have listened to in the years since, and I don't know what ran me out of the area that day. My dad found a 1.5 mile Bigfoot track line in November of the same year and renewed my interest in the existence of Bigfoot, which led me to the discovery of stories and more cryptids out there. I've also attached a photo of my arrival to the girls' camping trip in 2012. Look closely at the background. You have mine and my friend's permission to show the picture. A bit of background on the photo. Our campsite was miles from any other campsite. There was a creek running to the left, looking at the photo, and a spring to the right. There were 4 of us girls and 4 dogs. We didn't have a clue that we were entertainment for a family of dog men. Bracket, please tell me if you think it's something else, and bracket. The dogs never alerted anything. We played loud music off and on. The only thing weird that any of us recall is walking back into the dark part of the forest, and we thought it was creepy back there, so only ventured 50 yards or so before going back to camp. You can use my name, Steve, as I didn't seek these experiences out. I do keep my eyes and ears open while I'm in the woods and fishing a bit more these days, and I always have my 38 on me. Thank you for being such an honest and strong voice for truth. Please keep fighting the good fight. Sincerely, Billy. Well, Billy Barnes. Well, I'll tell you what, Billy. I'm looking at your photo right now. To tell you the honest truth, I suck at seeing things that people point out in photos. They say where to look. I really do. But I'll post this up because I am not seeing anything alarming to myself. Really. For me, maybe possibly should have outlined it. I don't know. Maybe somebody else will see something. But at your request, I shared the picture. So maybe I'm just an old school blind as a bat dork and I can't see anything and I'm missing it. I don't know. Maybe somebody can say, hold on. Maybe somebody can give us their input in the comments below. But thanks for that share. Thanks for the positive comments. And make sure you email back in with new stuff as it happens or as you come across it, and anything that may be helpful to the people, all right? Thanks again. All right. Encounter in the Pinchler Range, 29th of May, 2021. Well, here we go. On Saturday, 29th of May, 2021, after a late start, 2 friends and I began our trip. Abby, Ray, and I planned to ski in on our skis over the snow still packed over the forest road 5141 to the Carp Lake Trailhead in the Pinchler Range of southwestern Montana. We also had Abby's dog Flint, a 5-year-old setter/retriever mix, and my dog Rhett, a 10-year-old border collie. We planned to camp at the trailhead for the night and hike in the next day up to Carp Lake itself to get some late-season backcountry skiing on the fingers of snow above the lake. We parked the truck about a half mile past milepost 9 on the forest road, where the snowpack became too much to drive through in Ray's truck with four-wheel drive capability. Abby and I began to ski in on our skis, and Ray behind to snowshoe in because he forgot his ski skins. We started at around 15:30. The snowpack on the forest road was rutted from other adventurers attempting to drive through the snowpack, but most of them appeared to have gotten stuck in the ditch, gotten free, and aborted their attempts. We did a mix of skinning on our skis/snowshoes and removing our gear to walk over to the melted out sections where there was no snow to ski on. After milepost 11 or so, we reached two vantage points where the forest road is at its highest elevation. It rises, and it overlooks to the south to the mountain bowls we plan to ski the next day. At this point, the entire road was melted free of snow, so we all had removed our gear, strapped to our packs, and hiked the rest of the way in. At the second overlook, an elderly couple on a four-wheeler with snow tracks rather than tires were parked watching two bull elk in the meadows below the road. Our approach scared the bull elk to the southwest of the meadows. We shared greetings with the couple, and they headed back northwest on the road as we headed down the road, grade east to southeast to the trailhead. The rest of the road drops about 1.5 to 2 miles to the east-southeast until it reaches the trailhead, a large cleared loop with gravel and grass, and a small copse of trees in the center of the loop. We reached the loop at around 17:30 and began to set up a small camp around an old fire ring in the northeast corner of the loop. The day was still bright with sun, about 60 degrees, and a clear sky. The woods were dead silent. No jays, warblers, or birds chirping. No squirrels or chipmunks chittering. It was perhaps rather early in the season for crickets and grasshoppers, but there was no insect noises either. We cooked a small meal of some rice, quinoa, and curried vegetables, then lounged in camp as we all played some songs in Abby's tin whistle. Sometime around 1800, I felt or heard several minutes of infrasound. I first suspected it was a large diesel engine low idling many miles distant, but it continued in a constant matter. I chalked it up to wind through the mountain basin we were in. While playing a bit more on the tin whistle, we heard a double knock on a tree. Knock, knock. From in the trees about 50 feet to our east. The dogs both stood to the east side of our camp, looking warily into the trees but not alarmed. We talked about what bird it must be, and I assumed it was a flicker knocking on the trees for insects. About 3 to 5 minutes later, from the same spot was another knock, knock. I rationalized it as a flicker, despite the precision and the consistency of the knock. Abby and Ray began to collect their firewood from the trees to the east of camp, while I ran down to the creek, about 3/4 of a mile south of the trailhead loop, down the Carp Lake Trail, and filled all of our water containers. Flint stayed with Abby and Ray, while Red came with me down to the creek. Ray says that while he was gathering firewood in the immediate vicinity of where those first knocks occurred, that he heard slight footfalls and saw a movement through the brush, but too obscured by trees to be sure what it could be. After we three gathered back at camp, we rolled out our bedrolls in a triangle around the fire pit. I started the fire while Ray cut the gathered branches into firewood with his handsaw, and Abby sorted some of her gear into the tent. At about 1900, we heard a vehicle driving down the forest road. A Toyota pickup with two guys in it drove around the loop. Rhett excitedly greeted the fellows. We all waved at each other, and they drove back out of the loop without getting out. They drove back up the road, and soon after we heard them shooting a pistol. From the noise, they were shooting somewhere around the Vantage Point meadows into the hillside to the north. They shot for about 10 minutes. Then we heard the distant engine sound disappear to the west. The double tree knocks began again to our east, about 50 feet from our camp in the trees. Immediately after the double knock to the east, a double knock was made to the southeast of our camp, probably 150 feet away in the trees. Both dogs began to act nervous, and they started circling our camp, looking into the trees. Abby, Ray, and I mused about the oddness of the knocking and kept rationalizing it as a flicker or a squirrel, and we discussed the dog's odd behavior. About every 3 to 5 minutes, the tree double knocks continued. Always the east knock, then the southeast knock, and the third knock joined just above us to the north, about 30 feet in the trees. The dogs became much more agitated, and Rhett would work around camp in a circle, curled up at one edge looking out, stand back up, circle camp, curl up at the other edge looking out, stand back up, and kept circling. Occasionally at the sound of the double knocks, the dogs would rush out toward the tree line and stare into the trees, but they would not enter the trees or give chase to anything. They would immediately resume circling the camp and looking warily out into the trees. I took a rock from under the firing, and several times after the double knock occurred from the east, I double knocked back onto another fire ring rock. But we never heard anything that we considered a reply to my knock. I've spent my whole life since I was 5 years old adventuring in the Montana woods, and Rhett and I have been off the grid for at least 10 years, living in remote places. I can identify what animals nearby based on Rhett's behavior and reaction to them. He has a very distinct barks for certain predator or prey animals. I am proficient at knowing what an animal is based on the animal's movement, noise, or vocalization. I've never seen my dog behave in this manner. I had no idea what the double knocks were, despite trying to rationalize it as a flick or a squirrel. Abby Ray and I now become more nervous due to the dog's behavior and kept trying to rationalize what oddness was going on. The double knocks continued to occur in sequence about every 3 to 5 minutes. East knock, southeast knock, north knock. We could also hear the very slightest of movement or footfalls from where the knocks are coming from, and the knocking locations accorded to that movement, though they all three stayed in those general locations. I mentioned that no flicker I've ever known could knock so consistently and regularly, nor in the sequence with other flickers. Abby began to rationalize the occurrences of badger, a wolverine, porcupine, or other wilder idea of standard Montana animals. I mentioned why I considered those animals to be very unlikely to behave this way. I shared that, however crazy it seems, I had heard of Bigfoot encounters where tree knocking was a common occurrence, and we three mused about cryptids. I'm not certain of the time, but we had only a bit of direct sunlight remaining on the trees near camp, probably 20, 30 or so. Immediately after one full set of double knocks, east knock, southeast knock, and north knock, there came a large vocalization. Choof! From inside the copse of trees in the middle of the trailhead loop to our west. The dogs stopped circling camp and ran toward the copse of trees, stopping outside the trees but going wild, violently barking and growling. I do not recognize Rhett's bark as any particular predator bark he's ever used, and his behavior is nothing I'd ever seen. The dogs began to circle camp again. I tried to rationalize the chuff as a bear, but I knew that was a stretch. Plus, Rhett's behavior did not match how he has ever reacted to a bear. I walked from camp around the entire copse of trees looking into it, and both dogs nervously stood near me, staring into the area the chuff came from. They could not enter the trees, and I saw nothing. For the next hour or so, as evening descended, Ray, and I sat near the fire on our bedrolls and tried to rationalize what was going on. We made some fir needle tea on the fire and ate some dessert. The pattern continued every 3 to 5 minutes. Double knocks from the east, southeast, and north of camp, followed by the chuff from the copse of trees. The dogs circled camp nonstop until the chuff, upon which they would lose their minds and go violently barking and growling at that spot in the copse of trees, and then return to circling camp. Sometime around 21:30, we heard the slightest sound of footfalls of rustling movement from the knock locations. They all seemed to move closer. And upon the next set of knocks, they almost sounded like just inside the trees from our camp. I used my headlamp to try to shine into the trees in the dusk of light, but I saw nothing but thick trees. The chuff location also seemed to move closer to us, now to the eastern edge of the copse of trees rather than the western edge. Abby, Ray, and I discussed the possibility of leaving versus digging in for the night. Ray was ready to leave right now without even packing gear up. Abby was uncertain, and I was still baffled, exhilarated, and curious by the entire situation. I knew this seemed like Bigfoot behavior I had heard of in some alleged encounters, but kept rationalizing to myself that it cannot be. I had not smelled any deep stench or skunkiness. It had to be some standard forest creature behaving oddly. I just flat out could not be having a Bigfoot encounter. At this time, I had not considered what the knocks and the chuff really meant, and I figured that the behavior by whatever these creatures were meant they were more curious than threatening, and therefore considered that we could stay the night anyways. Upon returning home, I am almost certain that we were being hunted as though we were deer to be flushed. 3 knocks, all communicating. I'm ready, and I'm in position. From 3 likely passive flight into the forest, and 1 chuff to flush us anyway but west into the ambush of the other 3. We continued to get more concerned as night came on, and the behavior seemed to get closer and closer to camp. Around 22:15, Ray said, "I can't sleep here tonight. We have to leave." Abby conceded that we should do the same, and I mentioned that hiking out about 4 to 5 miles in the snowpack in the dark was going to suck, but all agreed. We all packed up our gear as swiftly as we could by the light of our headlamps. The knocking continued from the 3 points, but the chuff had stopped. The dogs continued to circle our camp nervously. From fairly distant to the southwest, perhaps a half mile or so, I heard a loud whoop. Abby and Ray were fiddling the last of their straps and gear while I did a sweep of the camp. Make sure we left nothing behind. I was standing to the east of them during my sweep when I heard the east knock closer than it had ever been yet. I looked up, and about 25 feet from me, just inside the first edge of trees, was a large pair of wide-set, circular, deep red, glowing eyes, about 10 to 12 feet off the ground. And when my headlamp hit the eyes, they glinted a luminescent red rather than just the glow I'd seen before my headlamp hit them. All I could otherwise see was the faintest idea of a broad, wide, black, humanoid face, but I could not discern any real features. I said, No, guys. We have to go now. Let's go. Fiddle with your packs as we go," and pushed lightly into them toward the west to get them moving. Abby and Ray started to walk, but Abby insisted to know what had happened. I told her, "You guys do not want to know. I don't want to even think about it. We need to go. Trust me." She insisted that they know since we were all there together. I again insisted that they would not like it and that we just needed to keep hiking briskly out of the woods. Abby insisted again, so I told them about the glowing red eyes and the massive dark humanoid face at an impossible height just inside the trees. I considered the pistol I carry and that Ray had his pistol as well, but after getting the vaguest sense of the creature's massive size, I decided that to fire a warning shot or to try to shoot the creature itself would just escalate our situation to more dangerous levels. I think a 9mm would be like shooting an airsoft gun against creatures like this. Ray took the lead of the group and says at this point he felt the oppressive threat around us mounting, and he had to shut down all considerations of the glowing eyes I had seen because it was going to make him panic if he thought any more about it. He tucked his headlamp just onto the road ahead and hiked on. Abby took the middle of our group, and she mentioned how, in her work in mining and geology, that one must not entertain thoughts of creepy things in the darkness, keep one's mind on the task at hand. And she encouraged us all to just keep our headlamps on the road ahead, refusing to look into the trees. I took the tail of the group, and despite my mounting fear from the glowing eyes, at an impossible height, I was still baffled by the entire surreal experience, and part of me refused to believe that this was happening. I stopped occasionally and looked back. I heard the slightest footfalls or rustling in the thick trees along the road and on both sides of the road, about 10 feet into the brush behind me. I saw the same glowing red eyes and vestige of massive humanoid face about 10 to 12 feet off the ground. I said, No, guys, let's go faster, please. I don't want to creep us all out any more than this whole night, but we are being flanked on both sides by these things. Rhett was about 50 yards ahead, leading the group in the shine of Ray's headlamp. Rhett would occasionally return to the group, then sprint on ahead. Rhett has chased shadows from the headlamps his whole life and seemed preoccupied with that more so than any guarding or wariness. Flint was trotting just ahead of Ray for most of the way out, and occasionally worked back near me. Neither dog seemed occupied with interest or concern into the forest along the road. Flint seemed intent on trotting back out. At a couple of points, Flint would stop and freeze, looking to both sides of the road in the trees, and acted almost paralyzed. I continued to hear the slightest footfalls or rustling just behind us, about 10 feet into the trees. At any time I looked back, I saw the same glowing eyes staring at us. The eyes would flash behind the trunks and branches, but reappear through the brush as we moved. They almost seemed to float right through. Even though the forest on either side was quite thick, dog hair forest. The near silence of the movement through this dog hair still freaks me out. Nothing can travel that quietly through dog hair forest. The road eventually travels on a side hill. The hill drops off steeply from the road to the south and rises steeply from the road to the north. We continue to be flanked from just inside the forest, and despite being off into the forest and down the hill, the eyes to the south were almost at my head height. The eyes to the north of the hill above the road appeared at points to be 30 feet above us, rising or dropping as the hill got steeper or shallower. As we neared the vantage point meadows where the forest road turns to run northward, up on the high knoll to the north of the meadows come a set of whoops. We all stopped and listened, and I felt a new sense of hair-raising creepiness. When I tried to theorize about it, neither Abby nor Ray cared to talk about it at all. Abby made some light chatter about innocuous things to keep herself or us occupied with thoughts other than the weirdness of the current incident. Ray occasionally made a comment, and I was preoccupied with the creatures flanking us and not paying much attention to the conversation. Right about where the forest road turns from a westward rising grade that was all melted out of snow and northward downhill grade filled with rutted snow, something massive passed extremely close behind us and around our right sides into the forest head. We all caught a rush of hot air and a deep reek of skunky, hot body odor. Abby told Flint to stay away from that skunk. I said, that was no normal skunk. You guys felt that thing pass us, too. I think and I know why they call them skunk apes. Despite the proximity of the creature's passage, none of us saw anything in our headlamps' light. I cannot explain how this is possible in any way. We continued down the road grade through the snow, which was getting crusty in the cold rather than soft and slushy as it was earlier that day. It made the hiking out easier, and not to be post-holing in the snow, as Abby and my skis and Ray's snowshoes were all strapped to our packs. None of us wanted to stop and put our gear on, even if we could have traveled faster over the snow with our skis and snowshoes. I kept hearing the near-silent rustling in the forest to either side and kept seeing the glowing eyes on either side of the road, just inside the forest. At times they were more distant, and at times they were within 8 feet of us. Whenever they got close, I would push up onto Abby's backpack and insist that we hike out more briskly, and that they were getting closer. Ray and Abby told me not to stop telling them anything about the creatures following, that they did not want to know or think about them, that it would make the creepy situation turn into a panic situation. At about 01:30, we came into sight of the truck about 200 yards away. The road opens up to both sides with wide slopes of rock and soil, and I did not sense or see us being flanked at all after that point. We threw our packs into the pickup bed, and Ray drove us out. As we drove, we didn't talk much, but Abby told us that we had just encountered an overzealous bear trying to convince herself that there is a rational, non-kooky explanation for what we just experienced. Ray says that even though we were safe back in the truck and driving out, he was not watching anything but the road because otherwise he would be panicking. The next day, Ray and I decided that we need to go back to the trailhead to look for sign of anything, footprints, fur, smells, scat. Something to give us evidence of the creatures that were hunting us and following us out. My brother and his girlfriend came along with a second vehicle and their dog. With 2 vehicles, we had a rig to help pull the other out if one of us got stuck in the snow. We were unwilling to hike in again on foot and wanted the comfort and quick escape if we needed it. We were able to drive up the snow-packed road without trouble and met several other rigs, 4-wheelers, side-by-sides, going in on the same snowpack. At the trailhead, there was the normal spring day noises I expect to hear: warblers, jays, magpies calling, squirrels and chipmunks running around and chittering. We crawled around the areas where the tree knocks had come from and inside the copes of the trees where the chuffing came from. The soil is hard-packed gravelly granite and springy moss and ground cover, and we found no footprints or tracks, fur, scat, or sign. I had Ray hold a long branch with a hat on the tip at the exact spot where I'd seen the first set of eyes. We measured the height that I recognized as where the eyes were, based off the nearby trees, and it measured out 12 to 13 feet off the ground. We spiraled out from the site of our camp through the forest but found no tracks or sign in any remaining snowbanks or wet areas. On the drive back, we stopped several points to check for broken branches, tracks, or any sign of road that we had been flanked but found no sign. When did the incident occur? 2021, springtime, 17:30 on 29th of May to 01:30 on 30th of May. bright, bluebird, sunny day with a few clouds, 60 degrees into the clear, cloudless, brisk night around 30 degrees. Where did it occur? Northeast town was Phillipsburg, Montana. Forest Service Road 5141 to the southwest of the East Fork Reservoir in Granite County, Montana. All right, man. Looks like this is, you told the story and you copied it from a report you must have posted somewhere else. But either way, thanks for sending that in, all right? And it's quite obvious if you sought out my channel or this topic online, bumped into my channel, and then emailed us, you already know what it was. It's just confusing as to what it really is, right? And, you know, a lot of people in the past have mentioned that they felt they were being possibly herded to be ambushed. And I can assure you, and I've said this in the past, I can assure you that if these beings want your ass, they do not have to attempt to ambush us. They're just going to walk right out and grab you. Right? That's all there is to it. These things outclass our ass phenomenally. There probably isn't even an accurate comparison. It's just the way it is. I haven't a clue what the motivation is when they do this to people, but it sure has done a lot. There's no getting out of that one. Is it for shits and giggles? I don't know. Is the vibration between dimensions at that right vibrational stage just enough to see through side to side and be able to terrorize somebody for shits and giggles? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Possibly. Is there somebody alive today, a human, that has the solid answers? Maybe. Possibly. Probably. Who knows? Are they ever going to share with us and clue us all in? Absolutely. Maybe, possibly, if we keep talking and the group of people demanding answers gets much, much louder and louder. That's probably what's going to knee-jerk future facts to be shared, right? But anyway, thank you so much for that share, man. And if you ever come across anything else that you feel may help the people, make sure you email it in. And that goes for everybody else out there listening as well. So, I hope you enjoyed the backdrop scenery. And there's going to be a lot more coming.